Welcome back to Stranded in Pittsburgh. Took a nice little week off last week. Had a great episode with the Fort Michael McHenry. Go check that out if you feel so inclined. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening. Subscribe. Hit a like button if they have one. Leave a nice review. Say some nice words about us. Nate is back from Boston. That's why we didn't record last week. And if you want him to be able to afford more vacations, you'll support the show and eventually help us start making money. Nate, tell everyone how that vacation was.
It was awesome. Honestly, Boston's a great city. Got to tour Fenway Park. I mean, one of the most historic ballparks in America. So that was great, but didn't realize you had to shut down the operations while I was away.
Yeah, it's kind of vital for you to be here right now, especially the way Ethan's been just really phoning it in. And I hope that's not too apparent on camera or on the recordings, but it's just I don't trust doing anything with him alone at this stage of the game. But on a real note, Ethan and I both felt like we got hit by trucks, locomotives, whatever you want to say last week. Ethan, are you feeling better?
Oh, I'm feeling so much better than last week. I felt like I was dying at the point where you were texting me last week. I was like, thank God. I was hurting. I had a bad cough. I was feeling very, very lethargic, but we're back now. We're back. I'm back better than ever, almost 100%. So good to be back. Good to be talking. And obviously you're feeling a lot better too, Nick. So
yeah.
I'm
Whooping
glad
cough
that
is no joke.
we're all off the IR and we're back ready to go and talk some Pittsburgh sports.
Exactly right, Ethan. And the Steelers were on bye last week, meaning we didn't really miss much in terms of previewing things. Felt a little bad about the Penguins, but we'll give them their due diligence later on in this episode. But football sells, so we'll start with football this week. Pittsburgh back in action after a nice little bye week, as I just mentioned. They're 3-2. They'll be traveling to Los Angeles to play the LA Rams. That's a 4:05 start here in the Great North on Fox. Interested to see how much the Steelers fans travel for this one. LA, known for having big, loud crowds at their home games. Just kidding. But anyway, maybe that San Diego, damn it, I knew I was going to do that. Maybe that Charger fan who is an industry plant will be there from the Monday night game yesterday. Maybe she'll be decked out in Rams garb. But anyway, guys, this is a fun little game, I think, here. I don't know what to say in terms of predictions when we get to that, because I don't know what to think of this team anymore. But regardless, I think it should be a good game. On paper, a lot of things are there that I like. Cooper Kupp worries me immensely, especially when you consider how Devontae Adams, Nico Collins, Amari Cooper, Ayuk, and Debo all played against the Steelers in terms of wide receiver ones and a couple wide receiver twos having good outings against the Steelers' pass defense. Cooper Kupp kind of worries me a bit, as do others. But guys, what are our initial thoughts on their return from the bye here?
Yeah, I think just dealing with not only Cooper Kupp but Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry.
Dealing with those two guys, I think is the biggest concern coming out of the bye for the Steelers. Obviously, they played very well defensively in that second half against the Ravens. They're looking to carry that and stack that half that they had against the Ravens in the second half. And even across that whole game, they really played well other than one or two drives. They played really well. But dealing with that offensive attack and that wide receiving core and Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, who's just coming off of an injury, just trying to deal with them. I think that's the biggest concern. The Rams, who I thought early in the year would have been a little bit of an easier game for the Steelers. Obviously, no game for the Steelers is an easy game, but seeing where they're at now and seeing where the Rams are at now, you kind of think that this is going to be a very tough matchup for the Steelers, especially being on the road, coming off a bye where you just look at how everything else played out. There's not much you can do as the Pittsburgh Steelers, but just seeing how that bye played out. Obviously, you get Deontay Johnson back. You get some of the guys that were on IR early in the year, which is a plus, which I don't think a lot of people are looking at. They're more looking at the grand scheme of things, which I know we'll get into later in this episode with some neighbors up in the north. We'll talk about that person later in the episode, but just seeing how this team was during the bye week and just seeing how everyone else in the AFC North did play, obviously, the Browns picking up a win, big win against San Francisco, and the Ravens getting a road win across the pond in England. Seeing them get that win there in a very tough environment. I don't know how anyone plays in England and is able to get out of there with a win and playing the way that they did later in that game. Just seeing how that all played out. It's a very worrisome game, and a game that the Steelers need to win, coming off fresh off a bye with the injury, with the guys that they get off coming off of an injury. They need to win this game to have any sort of momentum heading into this second half of the year, because it's only going to get harder from here in terms of being able to stack together wins.
Yeah, I think, we mentioned it. This game's a little interesting in terms of we don't really know what we're going to get. The Rams are a little bit more different than we thought at the beginning of the year, but I think this is a toss-up for the Steelers. I mean, on the road, I feel like historically they've played pretty well in Los Angeles and over on the West Coast. But I think this game, when you look at it, what the Steelers will see from the Rams offense, you're going to see a little bit different what Pittsburgh has seen through the first few games of the season. They've really had to focus on the run and see what other teams bring, on the ground. But I think this game, you're going to see a lot more through the air. We talked about Stafford with some of those receivers, Tutu Atwell and Cooper Kupp back as well. But, their running game, they're without Kyron Williams, who is out, most likely out for the game. So they've had to pick up a couple guys off waivers and whatnot. So I don't think the Steelers are going to have to, who knows, but I don't think the Steelers are going to have to are going to struggle on the ground game as much defensively, whereas they're really going to have to focus through the air. I think Stafford's going to have to beat them through the air, and maybe we'll see a little bit more of Joey Porter Jr. coming out of the bye. He had a couple big plays with the interception against Lamar Jackson as well. So, maybe we'll see more of him, but that secondary, I think, is going to get tested pretty well.
Yeah, I agree, Nate. And I like the point there, the running back, Zach Evans, a 6th-round pick, I believe a TCU and Ole Miss product. He's slated to get the start because Ronnie Rivers is also, I believe, going to be out for this game. Royce Freeman, that's a name you probably didn't think would be mentioned on this show if we were talking about the Rams 2 or 3 weeks ago, but Royce Freeman is expected to get elevated off the practice squad as well. So they're going to kind of have a hodgepodge of nothingness in terms of running backs for this game. But the Steelers' run defense has been suspect at times. So it's going to be interesting to see if they allow this Rams offense to get any kind of momentum. And then speaking on the passing game, Matt Stafford's been sacked 16 times this year already. That's 9th most in the league. He almost qualifies for AARP. So, you put some pressure on him, you get him hurt, you get him banged up a bit, especially his injuries last year. This is a guy who maybe, starts making some mistakes, starts feeling the effects of some of those big hits from guys like TJ Watt. And I'm not obviously rooting for the Steelers to batter and bruise this poor man. I want them to obviously get to him and get some pressure on him. Matt Stafford's one of my favorite quarterbacks. There, I just went on a diatribe trying to defend myself. But yeah, I think this, you get some pressure on him. This offensive line has shown some weaknesses, and I think the Steelers can really capitalize on that and make some big plays on defense, which, as we've seen this year, that's what they need to have happen if they want to have a chance at winning any ball games, I guess, unless something really kicks into gear here offensively. And Dan Moore Jr. might be back. It sounds like he will be back, and Broderick Jones will join Joey Porter Jr. on getting on the field once in a while, despite doing pretty well when they're on field. But with that in mind, get a little score prediction going on here. Nate, we'll start with you because we always start with Ethan, and that's just not fair.
Well, like I said, this is more of a toss-up. And one point I wanted to make, in terms of what we want to see out of the bye week. I'd love to see the Steelers incorporate their tight ends a little bit more. We've really not seen. I know Freiermuth has been out, but even with him out, Hayward and Darnell Washington, I just don't think have gotten the looks through the air as much. Tight ends for the Steelers only have 16% of targets, so I think they go through the middle a little bit more, be helpful in terms of taking pressure off of Pickens and the rest of the receivers. But man, this is a tough game. This is a toss up, and I don't know if this is one that the Steelers are going to slip up, especially after a big Ravens win. But boy, this is more of a 1-point game. So I'm taking Steelers 24, Rams 23. Steelers just crawl out of there with a win. Maybe last drive, Kenny Pickett leads them down the field.
Ethan.
I think that the Steelers in this game, they're gonna need to take more shots. They're gonna need to really be able to show us what we saw in that game against the Ravens, where they're able to take a shot downfield to Pickens. They're able to open up the field more in this game, and I think that's what you want to see if you're the Steelers right now. Obviously, they played conservatively on offense, which a lot of fans have been clamoring for them to just take shots down the field. I think they need to be able to open up the field more and take more risks in the second half of the season. Obviously, you're getting pieces back, like I mentioned earlier, in Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth. You're getting those guys back. This is the time where you need to really look at George Pickens for him to really break out, and all the pressure is pretty much taken off of him right now with Deontay Johnson getting back, and as well as Pat Freiermuth, two guys that have been major targets for the Steelers team. So I think if you get George Pickens incorporated the way that you want him incorporated, and have Pat Freiermuth and Deontay Johnson in that game, and still having a sizable role in being those guys to really take the weight off of Pickens, I think you're going to see the Steelers try to take more shots for Pickens and really taking more risks. And that's what you want to feel like if you're the Steelers heading into this game, is really just try to take more risk and be that type of team that, a lot of people want to see this team, and a lot of people thought in the preseason that you were going to get out of this team, be able to take more shots down the field, really to score outside of the red zone and be that type of team. So I think this game is still going to be very tight. Steelers are going to be on the road, obviously. I'm going to say it's going to be, once again, that one possession game. It's going to be that Steelers defense going to have to bail out the offense in the end. But I think you're going to see more out of this offense than you did back in week 6. Obviously, have the bye to talk over some things, have some meetings, really work on some things offensively as well as defensively. I think it's going to be another tight one. I got it 27-24 Steelers at SoFi.
Wow. I don't know what my pick record is. Can't be good. But I think that's because I've been trying to use logic to just go against my gut. I had a feeling they were going to beat the Raiders. I had a really bad feeling they were going to lose to the Texans. And I thought they were going to beat the Ravens. And now I want to sit here and tell you why the Rams should win this game. But my gut's telling me the Steelers are going to find a nonsensical way to end up in front. I don't think the offense is going to look like world beaters, but I think they're going to come out of this bye with a little swagger back, with some of the faces returning, and I think they're going to do just enough. And when all you care about is finishing 500, sometimes just enough is fine. I got Steelers 21-20 in an ugly game. An ugly game where they can't stop Cooper Kupp, but somehow, some way, they find a way. That's all you need to do. Matt Canada is someone who irks everyone in the Pittsburgh Steeler fandom. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but it has become a national phenomenon because Fire Canada chants, Fire Canada signs have taken over the mainstream. The most notable one was at the Penguins home opener when they played Chicago. Fire Canada chants echoing throughout PPG Console Mellon Arena for all to hear. And this got a lot of people talking, a lot of people calling it classless, a lot of people saying it's a step too far. What do you guys think? What do we make on Fire Canada chants echoing throughout the Penguins game?
I'll say to start, that first big one at Acrisure Stadium, I think that was, just the fans voicing their opinion, and, that's fair. That's fair for fans to do that, especially, they're paying a lot of money and they're seeing a poor offense, and, people want to see points on the board and they're not getting that. But when it transitioned over to the Penguins game, still home opener, not too far after the first initial one. Can't complain about it. I don't think it's bad. I think it's just Pittsburgh sports fans being Pittsburgh fans. Like they want to see some change, and nothing better than at least taking it across a different form and taking it to a hockey game. But I think since then it is just become, a little irrational. I mean, I don't know if you saw the videos of the Pens fans in Washington D.C. on the steps across from, the arena down there doing it. I was at the Pitt game this past weekend, and students were trying to start it in the student section. I'm just like, come on, that's enough. I mean, you've heard it. The big one in Acrisure, and then the home opener for the Pens. I mean, those are, it got a lot of attention, and I think since then it's just become just a little bit annoying and over the edge, I think, with it. And I think people are just trying to do it now to be cool. And I mean, the poor dude, yeah. I mean, does he need to go? Probably, because I mean, the offense is just not probably where it could be. I think if you had a different person in there as the offensive coordinator, but that poor guy, I mean, everywhere he goes, I mean, that's all he hears.
Yeah, I have to agree with Nate. Just seeing how it all played out. You're there, you're at the games, you're from Pittsburgh. The way that Pittsburgh fans are, no matter what sporting event, no matter where you're at, you can say those types of things. You can start chants, you can start an uproar, and people will back you no matter what. 9 times out of 10. And you got that with the Matt Canada chants, obviously at Acrisure during the Steelers games, and that went all throughout the Ravens game as well. And then carrying over to the Penguins, I was like, all right, like, okay, like they said, you had your voices heard, all of that has happened, but now just looking at it, it's like Nate said, it's getting old. It's now somewhat annoying. Like, obviously, yes, your voices have been heard, but what's really going to change? If the Steelers were going to do anything, they would have got rid of Canada now during the bye week. If they were going to do anything, I didn't think they were going to get rid of them just because who else would be able to call play? Who else would call plays? They have nobody lined up in the organization right now that would be able to call plays. They would have already gotten rid of them. They're not going to get rid of them throughout at least until the end of the season. Does he need to go? I think he does. But are they going to get rid of him? No. So these fans are just going to, throughout the rest of the year, are just going to continue no matter where they're at, whether it be at a Pitt football game, hell, at the Pitt for basketball season. Who knows what's going to break out? Because you know something like that is going to break out. It could happen anywhere. Hell, it could happen at the Riverhounds playoff game at Highmark on Saturday, and the Riverhounds are in the playoffs. It could happen literally anywhere in Pittsburgh, and people will rally behind it. At this point, it's gotten to the point where, yes, your voices have been heard, but why keep chanting it? You know nothing's going to happen. Deep down, the people that have really begun to start this chant at the Lincoln Memorial and across the street from the Caps Arena, nothing's going to happen. You have to be crazy to think that something's going to happen to Matt Canada now at this point in the season. They're the worst that they've been in years as an offense. And they've been statistically the worst offensive team in the league for the past 3 years. Nothing's going to happen. So if you're the Pittsburgh fans that are starting this chant, it's old. It's getting old. Nothing's going to change. If you keep doing it, more people are going to get annoyed, and it's going to lose its touch over time. So do I think it's going to end? No. I think it's just gotten to the point where it's just, for me, it's severely very annoying just to see it continue to happen. But knowing deep down in my head, there's nothing going to come because of it.
Well, I don't have much to add, thanks to Ethan, but I will say doing it at the Pens game, I thought was fine until I didn't watch the video initially. I'm like, okay, they're chanting Fire Canada. There's not much for me to watch there. I've seen a crowd chant things before. But then I realized they did it while the game was like being played. It wasn't during a break in the action. It wasn't during intermission. That kind of rubbed me the wrong way. You're at, a Penguins game, a franchise that hired all of the people the fan base wanted hired. They brought in Dubas. They brought in Carlson. They dumped a bunch of bad contracts. That's a team in Pittsburgh who's actually trying to win and making moves to try to win and put on a good product. listening to the fans. The other two pro teams in Pittsburgh don't tend to do that all that often. So that really rubbed me the wrong way that they were doing that while the Pens are out there on the ice, their first game back. I just didn't think that was the right decision. And like you said, Ethan, they would have done something this week while they were on bye. It's going to be something the fans have to tough out until the end of the season. And frankly, I don't think anyone wants to hear this happening at random events until the end of the season does arrive. So I think it's something that just needs to stop. He's not very good at his job. It's painful to watch this offense, and we'll continue to complain about it for weeks and months to come. But at the end of the day, nothing's going to change until the offseason, because then you're running the risk of somehow there being an even worse product. Because like you said, I don't know if they have anyone waiting in the wings. And in the time frame between two games, you're not going to have time to change that much in terms of what's already been established. So it's not coming until the end of the season. Doing this and making asses of yourselves isn't really going to change anything. But you know who didn't make asses out of themselves after a week where the media tried to make asses out of them? The Pitt Panthers. They said, you can take that blue vase with all of our doubts and concerns, and you can shove it where the sun don't shine. They beat Louisville. Nate was there. I heard Nate was the reason they won. They saw the twinkle in his eye, and they said, we can't let that young man down. Nate, how big was this win for Pitt for the rest of this season?
I think it's a good stepping stone, especially because to have Christian Veilleux in there and to compete the way he did, and put up he didn't put up any world beater numbers. I mean, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he was average. He played above average quarterback play where Phil Dracovic couldn't do. It's all they needed. It's all they needed against Cincinnati. It's all they needed against West Virginia, and they couldn't get it. So Veilleux did the job, didn't throw an interception. Besides a bad snap, the offense actually played a very clean game, a couple penalties. But other than that, I mean, to go in and beat a 14th ranked team, they do it every year under Pat Narduzzi. It's just a thing. I mean, they always find a way to beat a top 20 team, even on the years where they're pretty bad. Now, I think this game's a good step up in the right direction in terms of at least trying to get to a 500 record. Because at this point, there's no way they're winning 7 or 8 games. I just don't see it, especially because the run game is still questionable. But the other thing is, the one thing that's really, settled in is the defense has proven that as the game goes on, they get better and better. So as long as the offense doesn't make many mistakes, their defense is going to be pretty good down the stretch of a game in the fourth quarter. And it gives the offense the chance to win. And that's what Christian Veilleux had there offensively. But, speaking of the blue vase, I mean, I will say the one thing Pat Narduzzi, I mean, when someone is critical about his teams, he stands up for, his program, and he did with that whole situation. And I think it was a good program win in terms of this season in itself. I mean, where they were 1-4 and where they could have lost a lot of fans, and there was a reasonable crowd there at Acrisure Stadium. I think 46,000 was the total for a rainy game. I mean, it was raining pretty much the whole game, but the fans still came out. It's a 1-4 team, but I think that was a really good win for the rest of the season. And they go into Wake this coming weekend. And, another team that is currently struggling really bad. They've lost their last 3 games. And I think, the swagger that Christian Veilleux has also brought, I mean, he's out there, I mean, pimping himself out. I mean, after a touchdown score, I mean, he's celebrating. I mean, just bringing the swagger to the team, I think, is the other thing. And this team, they can ride that. I mean, they could end up being 500 again and getting a bowl game. So I think that's where that win puts them at right now, is getting back on track.
Ethan, probably a really happy week for you. Phil Dracovic no longer the starting quarterback. We all heard your tangent a few weeks ago where he was giving you just the worst time of your life in high school while you were playing the flute with the marching band. I mean, what's it like to see this guy fall from grace like this? I know you're rooting on his downfall. And as I alluded to earlier, when I slightly made fun of Matt Stafford, we don't like to wish on people's downfalls, but how do you feel about the decision for Phil Dracovic to now, I think, be quarterback number 3 on the depth chart?
Or how about tight end 5?
Wow.
Just seeing how he just decided to switch positions. But first off, shout out to Noah Hiles for giving Pitt that win on Saturday night with the blue vase, adding fuel to the fire for that Pitt Panthers team, and Pat Narduzzi going off and getting this team fired up for that win on Saturday. But yeah, just looking at where Pitt's at right now, I think they're at a really good spot. Obviously, getting that win was huge for them. And just seeing Christian Vier just playing with the confidence that he has, it's something that Pitt was missing all season long. And once again, I don't want to dog on Dracovic because he's out. He's out now. It's done. It's over with. I want to move on. But just to see him out and just see the difference. Obviously, I wasn't at the game. I watched it, and just looking at the difference of how the team was running. Obviously, like Nate said, Vier didn't put up crazy numbers, but he played with the confidence that he needed and the swagger that he needed to play with to go up against that top 20 team in the nation in Louisville. And the way that he did it, it gives the whole team confidence. Not only that, but it, excuse me, gives that, still got a little bit of a cough there.
Wow.
But it gives not only the team confidence, but it also gives that Pitt fan base confidence who thought coming into this season that they would have more success than where they thought they would be at right now in this moment. Obviously, it was a rough game against Virginia Tech last week. And coming into this game, everyone thought Louisville was going to just run all over Pitt and really have a field day with how Pitt has played over these past couple of weeks. But you didn't see that. You saw Pitt have some life that we didn't see at all out of this Pitt team at all this season. Just to see them really bring it all together with a sophomore quarterback, something you have to look towards more, not just till the end of this year, but moving forward, especially with Vermeil and Nate Yarnell, those two sophomores. You have to think bigger picture now in terms of this year. Obviously, do I think they could make it to a bowl game? I think they could sneak in and play well enough down the stretch to make a bowl game this year. But just looking towards that future and just to have a quarterback that obviously transferred here from Penn State, but to have that guy where you have him for years of control, depending on if he transfers or not, again, but having a quarterback that you have under that has multiple years of eligibility, you want that. Dracovic was going to be here for a year, and that was it because he's done. He's out of eligibility. You need a guy where you can grow into that role, grow into this Pitt offense. And do I think stuff was run properly this year? No, I don't. I don't think so. But just seeing how this team played on Saturday, it brings everyone across the board hope later on this season.
Looking at Pitt's remaining schedule after Wake Forest, which I think will be a win, they have Notre Dame, then they have Florida State back-to-back. If they lose both those games, that puts them at 6 losses, which would mean they need to win out to finish 6-6 and be bowl eligible. They also got the Duke Blue Devils for their last game of the year, another team that has spent time ranked this year. So we're looking at 3, maybe, I don't want to call them obvious losses, but they got to find a way to swing one of those and find a win. As a Notre Dame fan, depending on which version Notre Dame shows up, Pitt could actually run away with that game somehow. Other notable games this year, they got Syracuse at Yankee Stadium, and then November 16th, the week of my birth, on Thursday night, they will play Boston College in the Phil Jurkovec Bowl. He'll play quarterback for both teams, and they'll see which team walks away with the victory. Again, that is on Thursday, November 16th. Don't tune in on Saturday expecting to see that spectacle. But Nate, do you think, you kind of alluded to it earlier, you seem to think there's a way this team scratches and claws its way into a bowl game really quick here. We still need to touch on the Penguins. What do you think the path is for them getting into a bowl game?
Well, I think, you mentioned Wake's a winnable game, and then that Syracuse game also. Syracuse started off hot as they always do, and then they fell back to earth. So I think those are 2 wins definitely. And then you have those toss-ups, as you mentioned. And Boston College, I think, is a winnable game. But you have those toss-ups. You think Florida State definitely is going to come into Pittsburgh and get a win as a top 5 ranked team. But, we know how Narduzzi is with those. If they're ranked second, they better be gearing up for that game because you never know with Narduzzi's teams. But as you mentioned, the Notre Dame game, if Pitt can somehow get out there and play well early on, who knows? They could run away with the game there. But I think it comes down to, I think they'll probably lose those 2 games, and they're 5-6 going into Duke. And if they're 1 win away from bowl eligibility, I think they can button up and actually pull a win out in Durham. So I mean, Duke has been good this year, but I don't know if they're the team that's going to make that next step. You know, it's like some of those top ranked programs in the ACC, like Florida State and Clemson.
Good point. I was going to say, I think the Duke game is probably the one I think they have the best chance of winning.
Yeah.
It's a basketball school. No, I'm kidding. I love when Duke football is good. It's kind of funny because it pisses a lot of people off, and I'm all for that. Speaking of, that was a bad transition. Speaking of pissing people off, Penguins absolutely choked away their first game of the season against Chicago. Maybe the Fire Matt Canada chants were a bit misconstrued by the Canadians on the team. They thought they were trying to fire the whole country or something. I don't know. That was a really lame attempt to make a joke. I'm still feeling the effects of my illness, but I'm trying, okay? So lay off. But after that, shut out the Caps 4-0. Score 5 goals, I believe. All 5 of them came against the Flames in the third period. This team's shown a little heart, a little spunk. Nate, what have you made? Or Ethan, I don't care. Whichever one of you. What do you make of the start here to the Penguins season?
It's a start that you wanted to see after that game against the Blackhawks where they blew that 2-goal lead. Obviously, you're going to need more than 2 goals to win a game if you're the Penguins at this point with Jari. But just to see not only how Jari had a rough game towards the back half of that game against the Blackhawks, but just to see how he responded against the Capitals Friday night in DC nonetheless, just to see how he responded in this offense to go out on a tear that they did. I think that's something that you have to look at and just say, you know, if you can just play somewhat competent and keep this team in games, I think they're going to have a pretty good shot at returning to where they were at, where they found a lot of their success, you know, before they lost that streak of consecutive playoff berths in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And yeah, just seeing how they played against Washington, the Capitals, and then seeing how they played in DC, and then carrying that over in a back-to-back against the Flames, and how they were down, but they really fought back, and they were able to fight and claw back into that game and then retake that lead and put up 5 goals in that third period of play. I think that's what you want to see out of this team, but obviously it's not something that they can sustain and keep doing that night in and night out. And obviously it's still extremely early in the season, but it's something that you like to see, something that you want to see if you're the Penguins at this point. Just seeing how they're able to respond. And Malkin, he looks like he's freaking 25 years old out there with the numbers that he's put up so far. He looks like he's 10 years younger than he actually is out there right now. And for being that veteran guy and just seeing how he has played over the course of these first couple of games of the year, you have to be very excited to see where he is at as the season progresses.
Yeah, I'll say, you know, for the first game of the season, I was a little bit disappointed. Not necessarily in the Pens play. I mean, obviously to come out on the wrong side of things, especially giving up, you know, the lead, but more in the fans and the media, you know, for quickly just jumping on them and saying, oh, this is the same old Pens team we saw last year, a team that can't, for some reason, hold a lead. Man, did the Pens really prove them wrong, you know, the next 2 games in DC and against the Flames. I mean, you know, very good showings early in the year and showcasing what this team, you know, what the Penguins built this year and who they brought in. The top 6 forwards have given you exactly what you thought they were going to give you. Sid and Russ, 3 goals each. Gino and Riley Smith, the newest addition, with 2 goals apiece as well. So, I mean, you're really seeing those top 2 lines play really well. Now, the bottom 6, still very questionable. I mean, it's only 3 games. It's a small sample size, but you'd like to see them get involved a little bit more. They haven't played bad by any means, but start to see some production out of them. But the last 2 games, the goaltending play, I think, has been really strong. Tristan Jarry to bounce back. Ethan, as you mentioned, 19 saves shot out. And then Alex Nedeljkovic coming in for his first start with the Pens, making 34 saves on 36 shots against the Flames. I mean, a really nice win for the Pens and Nedeljkovic's first start. So I think we've seen some really promising signs early on. And I think, you know, you haven't really been able to tell the age of Crosby and Gino. I mean, they've been playing, you know, at a high level early on. And I think Sid, I mean, who knows? I mean, someone said it. I mean, who knows? He may be at a point per game clip this year. I mean, the way he started so far, I mean, it's been really good. It's been a really good sign of things that potentially could come, and this team could be, contending at a high pace this year.
Yeah, I agree. It's been fun these last two games. Big switch. That first game, Nate, I don't want to become one of the people you just spoke out against, and I don't want you to egg my house. But, it kind of felt like last year they just felt slower towards the end. It felt like they just stopped pushing at a certain point. But then they come out against Washington, and I mean, they scored a few goals close together. And then obviously against the Flames, 5 goals in a period. It seemed to just be this explosiveness that we weren't really accustomed to seeing from them last year. And it's really nice to know that's a possibility this year where the old guard is looking pretty young still and they're showing some flash and they seem to be having fun out there. And I think that's really encouraging already just a few games into the season to kind of see this team playing like they're young bucks, rather than, the oldest team in the league. But no, I think it's something exciting to keep an eye on here, how the Penguins continue to play in this early stage of the season, and if they can keep that up into the middle and later stages of the year. Can we keep this show up? I don't know. I was pretty rough tonight, and I'm willing to, sit here and tell you that I need to be better. But these two guys, they're even worse. No, I'm kidding. Really quick before we go, any final thoughts for this week's episode from either of you? Silence
Ethan,
is
go ahead. Ethan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was, first off, great to be back, obviously. But I think just looking to see where the Steelers team is at after this week against the Rams is going to be very telling to see where this team will be at as they enter into the last half of the year. I think that's going to be a very telltale sign of this game and how they respond with the guys that come back. So I think that's going to be really a really big game this week for the Steelers.
absolutely. Jacksonville and Tennessee, I think. Their next two games, those are two games that are going to be hard to predict. You want to win this one. One of those is on Thursday, too, so we're going to have a short week.
Yep.
But it'll be a short week before we're back, too, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next time. Stranded in Pittsburgh. See you then.